David, just give me the high five sign. Hello, and welcome to tonight's exciting CF Discovery Series. I am Sue Landgraf, Executive Director for Cystic Fibrosis Research Incorporated, and I'm very pleased to be here with you tonight to hear Siri Vaeth Dunn speak on raising a successful CF warrior. Knowing Siri, we know that this will be a very spirited, passionate, and educational experience for all of us. Before we get started, I'd just like to pay some remembrances to Carol Jenkins, CFRI's recently retired ED, and Camille Wasowich, nurse practitioner at the Stanford CF Adult Clinic. They worked together to create this series, and without their innovative energies, we would not have this very important, groundbreaking, live streaming CF resources program. So thank you both. The CF Discovery Series was designed to make vital CF information accessible to the CF community by presenting various speakers that are experts in their fields. Before beginning, I would like to note that no information presented tonight is intended for a patient's diagnosis or treatment. And as always, we urge you to work together with your healthcare team for your medical treatment. Tonight, we look forward to our presentation on Dancing on the High Wire, Raising a Successful CF Warrior, presented by a longtime CFRI friend and former CFRI board member, Siri Vaeth Dunn. We'd also, prior to getting started, would like to thank Genentech for supporting this important evening. Their support covers the cost of this lovely venue, the refreshments, and all the other costs associated with the program. Tonight's program, live from the Crown Plaza Cabana Hotel in Palo Alto, is being produced by your CFRI Live team, Eric Martin, Scott Wakefield, David Suhu, and Mary Convento, who is tracking questions from our online participants. I encourage you all to ask questions, whether you are here in the audience or part of our online community. To those of you who are unable to join us tonight in person, we're very glad you can join us through CFRI Live. And if you would like to ask any questions, you will need to register through ustream.com. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce our very good friend, Siri Vaeth Dunn. Siri has been involved with CFRI for more than 15 years. She was an invaluable CFRI board member for 10 years, and she continues to volunteer her time as the chair of our newsletter committee, where she researches and authors articles and edits all articles prior to publication. She is absolutely amazing. She doesn't stop. In addition to her years of guidance at CFRI, Siri is actively involved in many other nonprofit health and human service activities. Since 2009, she has served as the coordinator for the CF Parent Advisory Council, Department of Family-Centered Care at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. Siri has a master's in social welfare from UC Berkeley, which gives her a unique perspective on life in the CF community. Siri has 2 children, 1 son, and 1 young adult daughter with CF. It is with great pleasure that we welcome Siri Vaeth Dunn to speak to you about Dancing on the High Wire, Raising a Successful CF Warrior. Siri's presentation will be followed by a question and answer period. Siri, come on up. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to back this up one. There we go. Welcome, everyone. I am so honored to be here, and I welcome everybody who is attending both in person and also online. Thank you for joining us. I am both humbled and honored to be speaking with you tonight. I am indeed the mother of a proud CF warrior, Tess, who is turning 19 this week. She has become an outspoken advocate for her own personal health decisions, as well as an outspoken advocate for those other people with their own health challenges. And tonight I hope to share with you some of the factors that helped her to become a thriving CF warrior. That is my redheaded girl, Tess. Before I start my presentation, I just wanted to give some disclaimers. Yes, I'm an MSW and former board member, and yes, lead parent at the Parent Advisory Council at LPCH at Stanford. But tonight, my role is the mother of a CF warrior, and that's really where the place I will be speaking from. And so those other experiences obviously are all part of what makes up my parenting style of this warrior, but tonight I'm sharing my perspective. I do feel, I said, humbled to be here and talking about this because I don't presume to be the expert on this situation. We all are navigating our own paths. So I hope I share some insights with you, and I'm really thrilled there'll be an opportunity at the end for people to have questions, but also I'm hoping a place for people to share their personal insights as well. So I welcome you at the end to please jump into the conversation. So, the high wire. Why did I choose that as my metaphor? I will say, CF is one of those diseases that is just ripe with metaphors. You can be on the high wire, there are many different images, you're riding a roller coaster. But for me, the high wire is a personal metaphor because life post-diagnosis really is never the same. CF is such a capricious disease, and as a parent, I felt like once Tess was diagnosed, it's this constant movement between hope and also fear, and you have to really navigate your life in a different way. It's not impossible, you can do that and you can thrive, but it does take more attention to where you place your feet to maintain that balance. And the other thing about a high wire is that this guy is very high up in the air, but the goal is to build in steps in your life and for your child that you lower the high wire and you find ways to put in metaphorical safety nets to help support your child and your family. I just have to say as an aside, when I found this photo online that there were the comments, everybody comments online all the time, and they were saying that really he isn't as brave as you'd think because of that little thread that's tied to his ankle to keep him there in case he fell, as if that is not brave. But I actually liked that very much that he had that on there because, again, this is what life is about. When you're in a scary situation, you find ways to feel safe and find solutions and get to the other side. So, I have to use my little... And before I really jump in, I just want to have a moment of acknowledgement. I think all of us who live with CF, the person who has CF, the parents, the siblings, we're never immune, but I think it is such a time-consuming, stressful disease at times, and yet there's no break from it. It's a day-to-day routine that requires a lot of time, and so we normalize it. And there's some blessing in that when it becomes part of your routine and it is normalized. But the flip side is, I think you forget the weight you're carrying. And sometimes it's good to just step back and acknowledge the weight that your child is carrying, or the young adult with CF, and also the weight of the family. And it's not just the shock of the diagnosis. With CF, of course, there are constant diagnoses. It's, for example, Tess was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis-related diabetes. That was a whole new thing to get used to. Every time she has a culture result, if it's some new infection that she has to fight, that's a new diagnosis. So you're constantly dealing with that, and liver disease, osteopenia, the list goes on. And so you're constantly having newer stressors with it. And it is time-consuming. Tess is there with her bucket of meds, and I did a little tally of Tess's healthcare for the past year, and counted up, she has swallowed almost 18,500 pills in the past 12 months. She's had 750 hours of respiratory therapy. She's given herself 600 insulin injections and has poked herself 1,000 times to test her blood sugars. She's had 1 sinus surgery, and she's had 2 rounds of IV antibiotics with separate PICC line placements, and that's in the past 12 months. And again, I think that's Tess's routine, but I know people who are out there listening that many of you, that is probably similar to your own life or to your child's life. So again, it's just a reminder that there's a lot to deal with and cope with CF, and it's okay to just take a moment and acknowledge that, because I think we all feel like we need to be superhuman all the time. And I failed to mention the other stressor, financial stressors, insurance stressors that come with this disease. So a little history. Tess was born in the dark ages. And when I say the dark ages, I mean the dark ages before newborn screening was in place in the state of California. And I really want to give kudos to Martin Carassi for his work to get that in place in California. Tess was born in 1994. And when she was born, she was a seemed perfectly healthy. At our 2-week check-in, when we came back for the weigh-in that most people have after 2 weeks, she had lost a significant amount of weight, despite the fact she was nursing all the time. She kept losing weight. She cried all the time. She had a minor cough. She seemed to be in pain. Every time she would nurse, she would just writhe in pain. And so first everybody thought, oh, colic, that's what it is. Then we started going every week to the pediatrician for weigh-ins, and they thought, oh, it's reflux. This is what I love now in retrospect, let's tilt the bassinet. Maybe that will help with the reflux and things will be fine. Well, they weren't fine. So then it's probably the wheat in your diet, or maybe it's dairy. Stop doing wheat, stop doing dairy, and things will be fine. No, she was not fine. Then it was, just stop nursing. Maybe she's the 1 in a billion baby that's allergic to your breast milk, which was not a good feeling as a mother, I have to say. But she did not get better after that. So then she started having weekly blood tests. She had a prolonged x-ray where she had my little teeny 9-pound baby, a bottle laced with barium so that she could drink it and have the x-ray to see how her esophagus was functioning. She had a colonoscopy. She had an endoscopy. The colonoscopy, I still have the photos. They did note there was a lot of mucus in her intestinal tract, and yet she was not diagnosed. At 5 months, here's a picture of her. This was the weekend before. It was Mother's Day weekend. And we knew on a Friday that they were concerned she might have CF. And it was only because she caught a cold that turned into pneumonia. And so we got the call, oh, failure to thrive, cough, mucus, pneumonia. Maybe she has CF. So we went and had the test. We hadn't had the results yet, but we were living in fear over this weekend. And you can see she was just this pale little thing, and she was 5 months old and weighed 10 pounds. So we had finally the sweat chloride test was prescribed. I'm looking for the word. I'm looking at my medical professional in the audience here. The results were definitive, and the next day we were up at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital beginning our journey with cystic fibrosis. And here in the audience tonight, I can see Kristen Shelton, who was Tessa's respiratory therapist the day after my daughter was diagnosed. In 1995, Kristen was the respiratory therapist who taught me how to do CPT. And at that time, I hear it's changed now. When you're diagnosed, they kind of load you in slowly. Okay, today we're going to teach you about enzymes. Next, we'll do respiratory therapy at another time so that you can ramp up. But at that time, the model was like CF boot camp. So in a day, it was, these are enzymes, this is a nebulizer, this is what you need to do to sterilize them, these are the 12 positions for CPT, these are the vitamins you need to take. It was extraordinarily overwhelming. And I had, at the time, read a piece on one of those online CF services, and it had an article about when your child is diagnosed, it's as if you've landed in a foreign country, where you don't speak the language, you don't know the native customs, and you're completely disoriented. And that is really how it felt those first few days. And the sense of otherness from my friends and family, who were wonderfully supportive, but just processing the fear for the child. So, the initial response. I'm quite a fan of that picture. The initial response was shock, obviously, relief, ironically, and depression. And the shock was because there was no history of CF in our family. And of course, anybody now, once you're in the CF world, you just know the whole Russian roulette of genetics. And so you can just go generations and generations and never have a case of CF. But so while we did actually know, my husband and I knew 2 other families who had kids with CF, it still was so other to me. I couldn't imagine it in my own family. So then there was the relief, and of course this lasts only about 5 minutes. But I have to say, after 5 months of all those tests and seeing that little teeny body on that big x-ray table, finally having a name for what was ailing my child, and knowing, we weren't crazy, we knew what was going wrong, that there was relief in that. And then the other relief was, for the first time, she took those enzymes. It was like magic. She had a bottle. She didn't cry. She didn't writhe in pain. She wasn't having all this digestive upset. She seemed so much healthier just for that. So there was that relief. But then there was depression. And for me, I've said this to other people, that I think I just want to make like a 2-minute documentary about what's your number, where you go up to CF parents and you say, so when your child was diagnosed, how old did they say what was the median life expectancy? And I know if I ask Ann Robinson here, if I ask Marlene Wine, everybody will have their own number. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's imprinted in my brain. And I know for the Stenzel twins, it was the 10 years old, that was a number. So for Tess, when she was diagnosed in 1995, the number was 29. So, which, people, it's that double-sided sword. People would say, oh, well, so much progress has been made. Oh my gosh, I thought kids only lived to like their teens. It's 29. And of course, I'm thinking, I was older than 29 when I gave birth to Tess. So that is still really, really young. And, I'm sure we've all heard the comments where it's just, a person's trying to console you, but it doesn't quite work. And so there was the depression of it. But I would say one thing that was good for us is we knew we had the support of friends and family. My husband and I were in this together, and we were very fortunate to be close to a good CF center. So, how did we start this journey of coping and to the end where we could create the CF warrior? The first thing, I like this model of the airplane model, which is you can't help your child until you have helped yourself. You need to make sure you are sane and functioning and have perspective, and in that way you will best support your child to let him or her go off and thrive. So there's a lot of things you can do. You can first thing, educate yourself. People have different styles of how they want to educate themselves. Parents really have to acknowledge straight away that their responses and their coping skills can be completely opposite of one another, which can create its own challenges. But if you stick with it, you can find a way to make that work well. Being clear about what you need from your friends and family, and then getting involved to find your CF community. And educating yourself. I am one of those high education people, high information. That's what I want. I wanted to read everything about it. Obviously, there's a lot of information on the internet. Obviously, much of it is outdated and therefore scarier than it needs to be. So again, when I've talked to parents whose kids have been more recently diagnosed, I say, go to CFRI, go to CFF, go to your website for your own CF center, and start there and branch out from that point. Don't do your random search, because that can get a bit scary. Then in terms of the parenting together, I don't know why, but all these years of going to the discussion groups at the CFRI conference, and there is a lot, people talk. It's a very stressful situation for couples raising a chronically ill child. And so I had somehow heard statistics about these horribly high divorce rates for couples of parents with kids with CF. And so I just was curious, since I was going to be talking tonight, and do a little research about it. And it was interesting that they have done lots and lots of studies that consistently show that divorce rates for parents of kids with CF are not any higher than the national average. They're similar. But what's interesting is they are higher than other disease groups, like notably. So like with cancer, and there were all sorts of hypotheses about why that would be. And what was interesting is one consistent factor they said was that the difference with the child with CF, because it's a genetic disease, therefore the chance of having a child with CF in future pregnancies, that creates an issue for couples that is very, very hard. That for some people who want to go ahead, some people don't. So that was cited in a couple different studies. But what consistently was mentioned was marital distress. And so I think the key for couples is really recognizing there are so many ways to cope in a situation like this. There's no right, there's no wrong, and that some people are high information people. They want to read everything, whereas maybe the spouse does not want to know that much. It's too scary. Some people want to throw themselves into the CF community, make these connections with other parents, be involved in these organizations, while the other person might really want to avoid it. Again, it just they're busy enough coping with it within the family and supporting the child. They don't feel the need to go beyond that. For some couples, it's hard because there's the issue of public disclosure. Do you want your child to be identified as having this disease or not? A privacy issue, and sometimes people have different opinions. And then there are all sorts of decisions about school, public, private, homeschooling, traveling, more kids, not more kids. So it's just, I would say the key thing, and I would say this with my own husband, is that we found sometimes our coping styles were different, but what really worked for us is recognizing it's not good, it's not bad, it's not right, it's not wrong. This is just how we are, and so how do we come together to best support Tess? All right. My friend Tamara is here, and we say we want to make T-shirts that say chronic means chronic. And the reason behind that is when you have a chronic disease, like cystic fibrosis or like type 1 diabetes, it's a chronic disease. Chronic means chronic. It means there's really no relief. It doesn't, you may have good days, you may have days when you feel healthy and normal, but it doesn't mean that you get to then pretend you don't have that disease. It isn't that you can get away with not doing your respiratory therapy or taking your enzymes or whatever meds you need to do or doing sinus flushes or injecting the insulin. All those things have to happen every single day, even on a good day. So it could be a birthday or Christmas or the day you're leaving on a big trip. Those things still have to be in there. And that is, I think, the hardest thing for our broader support systems to understand. I think many of us are blessed with support systems that understand when there's a crisis, and that's wonderful. But it's the people who really get what we carry, coming back to my acknowledgments in the beginning, what we carry, what kids and adults with CF carry every day, that's the true gift. So my husband and I used to laugh because quite often humor really is the saving grace of every situation. But about the things that people would say, as I said, those offhand supportive comments, thank you, I think. They didn't quite. My favorite was when Tess was first diagnosed, and I was still in that state of shock. I could not believe that my beautiful little girl had this life-threatening disease. And I saw somebody, I shared the news, and their way of consoling me was to say, but, life is strange. I mean, she could get, hit by a car when she's younger anyway. And I said, that's true. We all could step out our door. You read about it in the paper every day, people getting hit by cars or whatever. So, but the difference is, with a diagnosis like this, I feel like all those cars and buses are aimed at my daughter. It's a completely different perspective. So, and then I'm sure everybody who's out there listening who has grown up with CF, people can forget. They can come to the house to visit and, it's just a cold. I'm just getting over it. I mean, I'm sure we've all had people come visit us who have colds and people swear, it's just allergies, all those things. And so my husband and I used to kvetch and laugh about things like this. And we thought, wouldn't it be great to just have the sheet to hand to people? Here's what you can do. Follow these rules for us, please, just to help support us. And the wonderful thing is, which I'll talk about more later, as part of the advisory council at Lucile Packard Children's Hospital, that we can have ideas like this and bring them to the table. And if it's a benefit to the broader CF community, we can create something for distribution. So what you're seeing here is the cover from this booklet that was produced at LPCH and is given to families. And it's basically how to help and support the family. Instead of my having to say to people, I wish that it would really mean a lot to me if you'd actually do something to raise money for CF. I really wish you wouldn't tell me the latest horror story you just heard about that person with CF who died. Or I think it would be a gift to me if you would actually learn how to do CPT. This is, when Tess was little, we didn't have the vest for the first few years. To learn to do CPT, so we could actually, my husband and I go out to dinner and Tess would have somebody who'd know what to do. But it could feel difficult to do that. So by handing this book to people and having them read, it generated discussion. So the key things, learning about CF, giving emotional support, not exposing the child to illness, that's just a constant, learning CF care. And in the end, I did have some people who learned how to do the 12 positions as taught to me by Kristen at LPCH. And that was a real gift. And then the other, treat the child with CF the same as the others. Yes, there are all these things that Tess had to do, but I also wanted her to be able to pursue all her passions, and she's also a dancer and be in dance class and have her play dates and do all those things when she was young, and then that set the stage for her as an adult. The other thing, recognizing everyone's CF is unique, because obviously people always want to share stories, and yet each of our kids, each as an adult, each case of CF is so different. Pay attention to the siblings. I'll come back to that one. Don't smoke. You wouldn't think that would be that basic, but it's pretty stunning how often people don't make the connection why smoking would be all the more horrific for us. And then again, recognizing it is a chronic, lifelong disease. Don't forget the siblings. This is my son, Dylan, and he's turning 15 in 2 days. And a huge part of Tessa's success, I think, is that she has this younger brother. It's been part of her whole normalizing experience. So it's been great for Tess, but conversely, I think siblings quite often can get lost in the shuffle, particularly when there are crises for the child with CF. And Dylan, for his childhood, there were several times Tess was in the hospital and he was separated from me and missing me, and that was really hard on him. And he worries about her. And I actually said to him when I was getting this presentation together, what's the worst thing or the hardest thing about Tess having CF? And I thought he'd say, well, sometimes we have a running joke about who's the favorite child in our family. And I thought for sure he was going to say, well, she gets all this attention because she has CF. But he said, just seeing her in the hospital. Even like when she's home with the IVs, I can deal with that. Something about seeing her in the hospital is so hard for me. It was really interesting. And also just really acknowledging the stress he feels that he might not be expressing about his sister. And this came up this past year. As I said, she's twice had to have these IVs. And the second time around, he was thinking, this is not normal that within like 3 months, Tess is having to do IVs again. And so he came to me privately to say, is she okay? I mean, is she gonna be okay? He was very stressed and he was a little fearful to ask the question. And then last spring, we actually lost a very close family friend, who I'm sure many of you out in the community know, Gianna Altano. And Gianna, who was waiting for a lung transplant, there was a shortage of lungs, and she waited until she lost her battle with CF waiting, and then, of course, she became a donor herself. But Dylan, this struck a deep chord with him, and he again came up to me and said, Gianna died. Like, this is the first time I've really made this connection with Tess, and, is Tess going to die? It was a good reminder to me, because he is one of these very sunny-natured kids, very outgoing, very happy, and but he's carrying that with him. Importance of social support. I would say the most important thing about creating a warrior is getting your social support. That, of course, there's a huge definition of what is social support, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the CF community. Obviously, having friends and family who are there for you makes a big difference. But for me personally, finding my CF community has really been it was the complete change for me, and I feel very blessed that I first found my community at CFRI months after Tessa's diagnosis. And I was in clinic, and there was a stack of the conference flyers. And so I went to my first conference in 1995, and I have gone every year since. I have never missed a conference. And the reason for that, obviously, incredible information. But the other thing, what really sold me was that first year going to the support groups and walking into a room, and I felt like it was like being an expat, you know, you're in some country where you don't speak the language or whatever, and then you walk into a room and there are all these people from your country that you know. And that's kind of how I felt. I came out from the world where most people aren't living with CF, and I walked into a room where everybody was voicing emotions that I was feeling, using, you know, the vocabulary that I was just mastering at the time, because, you know, what is, you know, Pseudomonas, what's Cepacia? All these things get bounced around, and of course now they're second nature, but that first months after diagnosis, they were like, it was like a foreign language. So that was a wonderful thing. So I would encourage people to go to that conference, but there are other ways for people to be involved, and for teens and young adults, the CFR retreat is a great way to make connections and have that support. Great Strides events. It's, you know, it's for the foundation, but again, it's that finding community, other people who are going through what you're going through. Your CF Center Advisory Council. Here at Stanford, we're fortunate to have our very strong functioning group. In other areas, other towns, I don't know what the councils look like, but that's a great way to meet other parents and make change. And also the education days. There are all these online discussion groups, and I actually feel kind of remiss here because I wanted to mention the one thing that I didn't list there that that really should be on that list was the CF Roundtable, because they have such a great newsletter and discussion groups and really geared towards teens and adults with CF. So I'm just gonna, how's this for a promo, people? Because I really meant to have that on the list, and I'd already submitted the slides, so. But just such well-written articles, a great resource.
You are forgiven.
Thank you. I hope I made up for that. So let's see. Let me get organized here. And then again, there are other online resources, the Boomer Esiason Foundation, CF Voice. I'll mention that again in a little bit. Your CF Center website and more. Oh, and look where I am now. Most people know the company, Vans. They have their stores everywhere, and they make skateboards and clothing and sneakers. But they also have an online presence, and they have their own TV channel on their website. And as part of that channel, they have a whole bunch of different TV shows, different series, one of which is the Pass the Bucket series. And it honors inspiring artists and athletes and performers. And 2 years ago, they approached Tess and asked if she would be willing to be the subject of one of these shows, which was a tremendous honor. So I'm going to show the film. It's about 5 minutes long. But I have to give a disclaimer because Tess loves being part of the whole Vans thing. She performs at the Vans Warped Tour. But this is the classic CF story. We knew they were coming to film. They were sending a whole film crew up from Los Angeles. And the day before they arrived, she got really sick. And, you know, classic CF story. And I'll tell you, she did the Breathe Project, similar situation. But, so there's a part in here where she sings, and she wants me to tell you all who are listening that this is not a true representation of her voice. Okay, this is the one part where I have to be a little more techie than before. And am I clicking on lower left corner? David, thank you for saving me. See, my mind went to right there. David, come back here, please. What am I doing? There we go. Sorry. Oh. I'm sorry, everybody. We'll get this. Okay.
I was raised in like a really supportive family. I was alone in the terms of like in the sense that I was dealing with the cystic fibrosis, like having it in me on my own. But I always had like my mom or my dad or my brother or my friends around me to be like, no, we're here for you. Cystic fibrosis is a very but primarily your lungs and your pancreas. And then it also blocks off my digestive enzymes, so I have to take pills. So I take like 60 pills a day. So I have tons of thick mucus in my lungs, and I'm constantly coughing because I feel like I have to clear it out, even if I can't cough anything up. And for that, I have to do a vest, which is a vest that goes over and shakes. And then I do 3 nebulizers in the morning and 2 at night. And those help open up my airways and loosen up the mucus so that I can cough it up. Can I turn it on? Yeah. Like, how I tell people is they're like, oh my gosh, how do you do this? Like, you don't have a normal life. I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know what a normal life is, really. For me, it's just like, oh, this is my life. This is normal for me. I didn't really have a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not normal. Oh no. But there was a moment when I figured out that I could die young. Because with cystic fibrosis, you can die young. The median age is 37. Years ago, most people didn't make it past the teens. Most people were dead around my age, which is just weird because I'm not anywhere near dead. I think what pushes me is knowing that other people think I can't. And I'm very defiant and headstrong, so of course I have to prove people wrong. I play piano. I've been playing since I was 5 because my mom played. And I love listening to her play. I write with the intention to let out what I'm feeling. I love hearing when people are like, this song of yours got me through this really tough experience, or, I have CF too, and I just love listening to your lyrics, and I know I'm not alone listening to your songs, and that's what I write for. That's like the best feeling ever, because you know you're not alone. On stage, everything is sort of a blur, but when I sing, it's like I can feel all the emotions I had when I wrote the song resurfacing, and I think the people who are watching or listening can hear it in my voice. I'll stay though you're a stranger now. I'll pull through even when it's hard. Never want to leave when I'm needed. And your eyes stare right into mine. They see through all the pain. Do you not listen when you hear what I say? But maybe you'll see how it hurts me. And maybe you'll see that it's not all it's made out to be. And maybe you'll learn that I am right. But maybe someday I won't be in your life. You have so much potential from day one, and you can either do something with it or just throw it away and forget about it. And honestly, I think forgetting about it is possibly one of the worst choices you could ever make, because you have so much to do with your life. I just have this zest for life. And I'm very ambitious naturally, so I have a lot to accomplish in my head. Why wait with that when you can do it right now? Don't let anybody tell you you can't because you're a certain way. I can do anything despite the circumstances because I'm just I'm not my disease at all. I'm not my illnesses at all.
that film has had quite an impact. I mean, she has received emails from people in Brazil, in England, because it's Vans. It has had international distribution, and so it's been a great way to educate people and a way for people in other parts of the world who have CF, who may not have the great system that we have here, to connect with her. So I'll come back to that and her sort of presence with her music. Tess is really blessed that she has this creative, passionate outlet, which is her music, and it has been a vehicle for her to really own her disease and help reach out to others who have the disease, and actually others with other chronic diseases besides cystic fibrosis. So now you've seen a little bit about Tess. Okay, there we go. I just want to make sure we're in the right place here. I will say, just backing it up for how Tess got where she is now, so when she was little, I found as many age-appropriate books, anything that mentioned CF, and we all know the Mallory's 65 Roses, and online resources, coloring books, and really educated Tess about CF. I mean, the whole issue of transition is huge now, but it really just starts at the little baby steps when they're young to get them to own their disease. I let Tess teach her friends about it. She did a lesson about it at her school. We also it's good to acknowledge it's not fair. I mean, a lot of times, that's a classic thing. I don't think we ever outgrow it when we have a bad day and we go, it's not fair. Well, it isn't fair. It's just there's no way to explain that to a child, why they have to deal with this, and they're going to have to deal with it for their entire lives into adulthood and onward. It isn't fair. So you just have to acknowledge it. But having said that, not wavering on the treatments. I feel like that's another thing. Tess has been relatively healthy. Part of that is full-on commitment to her health regimen, and it wasn't that because she was having a bad day or she was grumpy about having CF that she'd skip things. That became very much a part of her normal. And yes, she has fully participated in life's activities. So along the road, what Tess has witnessed to become this warrior, she saw straight from the beginning advocacy within the medical setting. And so we have always seen Tess's Healthcare as a partnership with the team at LPCH. And because these people care, and it's very different. It's not like going to the emergency room because you've had an accident and you're going to be put back together and then you're gone. Or you've had some episode where you come in to have your appendix out and you're gone. This is a lifelong relationship, and really seeing that and honoring it, that we have to work together, and we all have feelings, and having a partnership has been very good for her to see and be a part of. Along that line, though, hand washing, gowns, masks, she has seen me the entire time asking, did you wash your hands? I think I saw you wash your hands, but I'm not sure. Do you mind doing that again? Because we all know it can be very awkward for some people with the medical profession. It's like there's the schism between, and the worrying about offending the care provider, asking questions like that. So that is something that I've always been comfortable doing, and she has witnessed that. And also, if somebody is not being kind or polite, to say, I think we have an issue here. Tess has witnessed that, and she now steps up on her own behalf. I think my participation on the advisory council has been a really great thing for Tess, because she sees we are really interconnected with her care team. And it's also been great because quite often we'll have projects that we're working on, and I'll go home and talk about them with Tess, so we actually have her perspective on this. And I guess the one last thing back here, you can see that middle picture there, and I had one I moved around and missed my third photo, but the second one, Tess participates in clinical trials, and that's the other thing I would say has really, that's part of her being a warrior, is that she gets that when she's using Pulmozyme, it's because years before there were people who were using Pulmozyme in a clinical trial, or that every step that she has now as part of her care is because somebody else stepped up. And so she herself consistently through the years has been a part of that. And it's a message she received early on from the team, but also I think from my husband and me. Opportunities to make change. Okay, Tess says that she wants like the full set of these masks. And I tell this story about finding opportunities to make change wherever you are in your center. And, you know, Kristen, we've had this talk, I've told the story before, but I love the representation here. Tess, there was a period of time when masks were not required in clinic. I'm sure we all remember that. And there were some people who felt like masks should be worn by everyone all the time. And the way it was structured is that if your culture had come back and you had some kind of bacteria that was more dangerous than others, that would be the determining line. And we get the letter at home saying, at your last culture, you had XYZ, and so you now need to wear a mask. And so what that made Tess feel like the time she had to wear the mask is I now stand out. I'm here at the CF clinic, and I'm clearly the one who's got like the dreaded thing. And so we had discussions on the advisory council, and it was interesting because the care team was more concerned about having that put in place, that it was mandatory for all people, really out of consideration for the patients. Like, how will that make them feel? You know, it's awkward having to wear a mask all the time. It was out of consideration, and yet it ends up the parents and Tess being one of them. If everybody wore a mask, there's no stigma in wearing a mask. There's no awkwardness with wearing a mask. And so I'm not saying that's why it changed, but I think it was good for the care team to hear the families are fine with it, actually. It makes it easier. So there are just all sorts of little ways you can get involved in your center and find ways to make change. Oops, did I just do that? Okay, advocacy in the school setting. I have to mention that because that was a really big deal for Tess. Finding the right school setting for her, her being an active part of that. She was part of teaching her classmates and teachers about cystic fibrosis and bringing the books and having, coloring things for her peers when they were little. But also then as she got older, really sometimes, as we all know, some teachers are more understanding than others. And so then it was the question of having a 504 or an IEP and having her educated about what that meant and having those protections. And then when she was finishing high school and looking at universities, it was interesting for her to really look at these universities in terms of what does it mean for my CF? Because there is a difference between public and private universities. And then, of course, a difference within the separate private universities. But what we found were the private universities that she was looking at were supportive of her, but unable to make the accommodations she would want and not mandated to do so. Whereas at the public universities, she would be protected by the Office of Disabled Student Services, and it was built in, and they have an actual whole person, that's a whole office, that's all they do. And so in the end, she ended up at California State University. She registered with the Office of Disabled Student Services, and it has been a blessing for her because she did have accommodations. She has a single room so that she can be doing her treatment and she's not exposed to all those infections. What I didn't mention about Tess, I think I already mentioned she has CF-related diabetes. As a completely separate stroke of lightning, she has epilepsy. So it also complicates the whole thing. So having her own room so she could sleep was really important. She also they have somebody that they pay to take notes for her in class so that when she's sick or going to clinic, she will never miss out on the notes because there's somebody who knows they are the designated note taker and they get a little stipend for doing that. And it's not out of our pocket. And she also has prior registration. She gets to register before everybody else so that she can make sure to get the classes that are scheduled in the afternoon so that she can sleep late in the morning. So these are the kinds of accommodations that are really, really helpful for her. And she then could say to them, I know you have other students at this university with CF that are registered with you. Yes, we do. She says, I know you can't tell me who they are, but I am nervous about cross-infection. I mean, imagine if it's a very small school, I go into a classroom and I'm sitting at the same desk as the person before me who has a bug that I don't have. Or conversely, they sit in the chair after I leave. And she said, I give you permission, I'll write it out, tell those people who I am. And she's kind of recognizable. And tell them my schedule, because I think this is a way that we can all keep each other safe. And this is something that can happen because of this Office of Disabled Student Services. So, and I'm really proud of her because that was part of her really ascending to being her own advocate and having her own relationship with this office and having these accommodations. And I would say the key thing that I've always stressed with Tess, you do not need to apologize. You don't have to say, I'm sorry, you have to accommodate me. I'm sorry. You have CF, this is how it is, and this is what you need. And it's not something you have to feel badly about. And I think that was a harder lesson for her because she doesn't want to inconvenience anybody, make them go to any extra lengths. So that I would say has been one of my biggest things. Oh, this is, I'm not touching this, I promise, it's just flying ahead. So Tess, as I said, has been blessed with this musical passion. And so I didn't do this, I promise. Are we back? Yes, we are. Okay. So she has recorded 2 albums. The first one she did through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, so I'm a huge fan of that group. But what's wonderful is that she always volunteers her time to support fundraisers, not just for CF, but for other causes. But she has become a regular at this benefit at Moe's Alley and raising money for CFRI through the years. And it's been a really wonderful thing for, I would say, the community at large, but also good for Tess to feel like she is a change agent. She herself is that warrior out there, and she has taught so many people about CF. I lifted these quotes here from Tess's, I think it was a scholarship application, but it really sums up who Tess is. She's not defined by her diagnoses. It is absolutely a part of her, but she has all these other things about herself: singer, songwriter, dancer, writer, daughter, sister, friend, college student, and an involved community member. She is determined to not be bound by it. She will accommodate her illnesses, but she's not defined by them. And she always uses her music as an opportunity to educate others. And the picture on the top of the screen is from the Breathe project, which was through CF Voice. And if people haven't seen it, you might want to go to the CF Voice website, because in addition to the Breathe project, it has so many wonderful films on transition, and just it's a great, great website. But the man on the left is Matt Scales, who was an English singer-songwriter who lost his battle with CF at the age of 27. And the filmmakers at CF Voice recreated the song and flew in 3 singers from around the country to make a montage of Matt Scales' song, Breathe. And that, again, is another one that has been seen all over, and she's received lots of emails. Whoopsie, I don't know what I just did, David. I touched the computer. Okay. Wait, really? I'm a Mac person. It's showing. Anyway, the other thing I like about Tess is that everyone can be a part of finding a cure. And so she ropes in all her young friends to participate in these fundraisers. She wants everybody to feel like they are themselves. They can join her in being a warrior. Word about transition, because she's 19. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, because that's such a big topic now. It's such a big deal moving from the pediatric side to the adult side. And the clear thing about transition is that it is a multi-year process, and it overlaps on the pediatric side over to the adult side. And it can be really challenging for patients and for parents. And Tessa's turning 19. She could transition to the adult side, but she has this lifelong relationship with her team that is deeper than just her health care now. And so it isn't about the fact, as she jokes, she still likes the movie Kung Fu Panda because it's always on in the waiting room. Mom, it's Kung Fu Panda again. So I'm thinking, maybe in another year we'll have pieced together the entire film. But it isn't about that. It's that she really cares for the people who care for her. And so she's in no hurry to leave. But in the meantime, she is gearing up and she is taking control. And, I put this photo of her there because when I say this can be challenging for parents as well, Tess, the last time she had the PICC line in and the IVs, she was so frustrated because she wanted to do her own IVs, so she'd go out at night. Like if there's a party or a band, she wanted to go here. And I had to like really have the leap of faith and that she would do her own, flush the IVs, get the heparin, find her spot, find a place to have a sterile environment. And yet she's 19 and she's living life and she's going out in the world and she has to be able to do that. So, so that was like my own personal transition of letting her take control of those things. And we all know the saying, give a man a fish, you can feed him for a day, show him how to fish, you can feed him for a lifetime. And quite often, that type of sentiment gets brought up with the issue of transition. You got to teach these young adults how to handle all their stuff. They have to own it and they'll be set for life. You can't keep doing these things for them. And that's true in theory, yes, but again, coming back to the acknowledgement, it's a hard disease. Let's be honest, people out there who are listening, do you floss your teeth every night? Okay, maybe some people do. Good job, Kristen. But a lot of, it's one of those things. We know we should take certain vitamins. Do we take them every day? And yet here are these young people who have this boatload of responsibilities every day. And when it's time for Tess to get ready, she's going to go to bed. Okay, she's going to do her 3 nebulizers with her vest, and then she's got her sinus flush, and then she's going to check her sugars, and then she's going to inject the insulin, and then she's going to take her meds. And it's this long, long period. So I know she can do it, but I'm also happy as her mother to keep supporting her. I feel like that's just one way for me to help carry the weight for her, and we all need help sometimes, a little break. So I guess that's my message. I think partly her strength is because she feels supported, and I don't feel guilty about doing that. Challenge of cross-infection, that's the final thing, because really I would say, and I'm looking here at some veteran parents who have adult kids with CF, and there is this generational split between those who raised their kids prior to the risk of cross-infection when all the CF camps were going and people could bunk up together in the hospital rooms, and today where it's wearing masks in an isolation room. If you're inpatient, you don't leave the room. And I know there's tremendous sadness that young people can't connect the way they used to. And Tess, really being born in 1994 and diagnosed in 95, was on the brink because her first hospitalization, like in 97, we ended up in a room with 3 other people with CF. It was that one big room at LPCH, and then we're moved to a double, but there was a baby with CF in that room. But by the next time she was in an isolation room. I have always said that as a parent, I don't want her to get something that she may not be able to get rid of. So as long as I am the parent and actually can make decisions, that I would make the decision to err on the side of extreme caution. And so this has been my thing now of the letting go, because she's an adult now and she is well aware of CFRI's cross-infection policies, but she's attended some CF events. She just had a benefit show for CFRI last weekend, and a couple of people came who had CF, but we worked out a system so everybody would know who everybody was. And so she herself is going to now own it, but I feel like she has the caution. But it is really sad because I put this picture up here and she gave me permission to say that this guy doesn't know it, but she's going to marry him someday. This guy here is Joe Dexter, and he is the front man, singer-songwriter, bass player for a band called Orange, which was based in LA. He's also English, so they play mostly in Europe. But he played at the Vans Warped Tour the same stage as Tess, and they met each other. Joe has CF. And Joe and Tess have developed this wonderful relationship because they both have the wackiest, inappropriate, quirky humor. And they're both singer-songwriters. They're both the front people for the bands. I mean, they are so copacetic. He's a little old for her. I'm just saying, Tess. But great guy, great family. And it's this great sadness they can't be together. And Tess has played at the Vans Warped Tour for the past 5 years, and for 2 years ago, her bass player wasn't able to show up. And she said to Joe, God, it'd be so great if you could fly up from LA and back me. And they had this whole discussion because he, at the time, had an infection. He said, I would not like nothing more than to be there on the same stage with you, but I'm just really, really worried about cross-infection. And so it didn't happen. So that is, the harsh reality of it. And again, one of those things where you can build in your ways to be together and be careful, but right now she's not marrying him. So she's going, gotta find a cure so I can marry Joe. That's all about that. Anyway. And I will say, she finds it very ironic that I have so many friends from the CF community whose kids have CF, that I am so fully immersed to have all the support, and that she, as the person with the actual disease, does not have the luxury of doing that. And it's, a bitter irony. So, let's see. I think I'm coming to the end. Coming back to that high wire, I didn't want to overdo the metaphor, but it really is a delicate dance, and it is a constant finding of balance. And it's a balance of the needs of your child to keep them safe, balancing their need to be an independent adult and go out in the world, balancing how to model being an advocate for them and when to let go and let them assume the reins and be their own warriors, their own advocates. And as I say, I am not the expert in this, but that is my experience with Tess, and I would love to have any questions from people, or if you have input online, please let your comments come in. And basically, in closing, Tess would say, live every day like your hair is on fire. And thank you. And, oh, wait, I didn't do this. I completed my presentation. I asked her to proof it for her input, which would be the most important, and she snuck that in there, so she does approve. Thank you all very much.
Stay here. That was absolutely incredible, and our girls are 10 years apart. So Victoria is 29, Tess is 19, and so a lot of what you said resonates so deeply with me. And we, if you talk about how you raise your child with CF and how to be a strong warrior, we did the same things, and it works. And I think the message is, be yourself, be strong, be hopeful, and never lose hope, and live like your hair is on fire. So I'm going to start living that way. But while Siri is here, I know we're running maybe a little short on time. Does anybody have any questions for Siri? This was absolutely phenomenal. I knew it would be passionate. I knew it would be exciting and very informative, and it was. And thank you, Siri, so much. And for Tess, she's an amazing young woman, absolutely amazing. I've learned a lot about your daughter that I didn't know before, and I have known Siri for a couple of years, and what I learned tonight about Tess is something that I really didn't know, the depth of who she is, and she is absolutely extraordinary to be 19 and a warrior like this, really. And so kudos to you and your husband. So, does anybody have any questions for Siri? Or comments?
Additions?
A homework assignment. I think you mentioned parenting and two people. Even though they maybe not be the same couple they were in the start, I would like to see the data on survival rates as a function of two loving parents helping their adult, staying in touch, keeping them encouraged. So
That's a good homework.
That is good. Newsletter article.
I know that Tess Dunn is a musician, and I'm wondering if someone wanted to watch her perform. Does she have an upcoming event?
Right now, she did. She actually just last Sunday had a huge event in Santa Cruz, and it was a fundraiser for CFRI. And I just have to say, it was pretty darn sweet because they came, in addition to it being an amazing show, a member of the Board of Supervisors came to the show and read a proclamation declaring it Tess Dunn Day in the county of Santa Cruz. But Tess has a website, and it's tessdunn.com. Super easy. And she's also on Facebook, but just for the ease of remembering, tessdunn.com, if you go there, it has links to everything: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all her side projects, and that is where she will also post upcoming shows so that you can keep track of that. And on the website, there's a spot you can sign up to receive emails, and she loves it when people will get on her email list and start the communication. And I would be remiss as her sort of manager if I didn't say, please like her on Facebook.
So that's the other homework assignment. We have to go home and like her on Facebook. So, yes. Kristen, do you have any question? You're going to go home and like her? Perfect. Already did. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, David.
At what point in time, when you talk about support, from a parent, does it cross over into nagging? I mean, the thing is like, where do you catch yourself at that point?
That is the fine line. That is a whole sort of different kind of tightrope to navigate. Sometimes it feels like nagging, but she's old enough now where it's really just like a reminder to her. And she's off at school, but she and I have this whole system where I'll text her and I'll say, "So, I'm about to go to bed. Did you do your treatment?" I always check in, so she knows that I'm paying attention, but that's not why she does it anymore. And I think that's the thing that is the hardest, is to help your child realize you're not nagging them because you're trying to give them this burden. It's like making the connection. This is what helps you breathe longer. This is what gives you life. And I think Anna and Isa Stenzel used to say how their mom would say that every mistreatment was one less day of life, or something like really crazy as an incentive. And they both laughed about it now. But for Tess, sometimes it just feels like nagging. But I think the key part of it was, this is as much part of your routine as brushing your teeth is, as all the other things you do in your day. This is just what needs to be done, so that it's not a negotiable thing. So, and I think, at least for Tess, because it became routine, there was less nagging involved. And then as she became older, there was less nagging because she makes the connection. She is healthier when she does her treatments.
So kids with chronic illnesses, and certainly CF, have so much homework to do in addition to everything else they have to do as kids. Did you ever feel like and I understand you didn't waver on treatments, do you feel like you ever gave her a break on household chores or things that you might expect her brother to do, but gave her a break because she has, hours of treatment or something? And did that ever cause friction among the kids or between you and your kids?
That is such an excellent question, because that's something I meant to mention when I had the picture of Tess and Dylan together, because part of that balance with the siblings is finding. Tess does put in a couple hours a day, with all her healthcare regimen. And so there were times, Dylan would have a responsibility and he'd say, "Well, why isn't Tess doing it?" "Well, Tess is doing her treatment." To which he'd say, "Yeah, she's sitting there doing Facebook." Like, he wouldn't get that she actually wouldn't rather be sitting at her computer doing Facebook. She's just trying to kill the time while she's doing her treatment. But I did not want him to resent Tess and feel like he was carrying a bigger burden of the household chores either. And so, yes, there were times I do feel like that had to be recognized. As a family, we all put value on that as a job for Tess, that was a household responsibility, really, for her. And it is. Obviously, we want her to be healthy. The healthier she is, actually, the better it is for every member of the family. And so we presented it as that, but also we're very careful never for him to feel he had too great of a burden. He was carrying her weight with household chores, because it is definitely a delicate balance between the siblings. And I did, before the presentation, I said, "Did you ever feel," we joke all the time about who's the favorite child. They both do this to me just to tweak me. "I see who the favorite child is." And I asked him, really honestly, "How did you feel? Do you feel like you missed out, or that you weren't given as much attention?" And he said, "No, I always felt, we show up at his games, we do everything to love and support him." He felt that. It was more for him, the absence, like when she's in the hospital. or when she's sick and we're more stressed, that he would feel it. But I would say it's the challenge of having a child with a chronic illness and a child who's healthy that are siblings. Conversely, it's the greatest blessing, I think, for both of them, because he's an extraordinarily empathetic, caring person. And I really see, obviously, we're all hardwired a certain way, but I think a lot of his ability to be such a caring person is because of growing up with Tess.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? This was really lovely, Siri. Really delightful. I've too have learned a lot just by listening to you, and we all live it, and we deal with it, and we have hope, and we're strong, and we carry on. So I think we will carry on the rest of the evening, and we will all go home. But a couple little housekeeping things first. I want again to thank Siri and Tess and. Tell her I am going to live like my hair's on fire from now on. I'm coming to the office tomorrow, David, with my hair in flames. Okay, but don't get out the fire extinguisher. It'll be okay. I would like to thank Genentech once again for sponsoring this event, because they have covered all the costs of putting this on, and it really is extraordinary to bring these types of presentations to the CF community. Everybody learns a lot and takes something home with them. It's very valuable, and we could not do this without Genentech. And please, just a reminder, I know all of those who you come each time, but please fill out that nice evaluation form before you leave. And please, from all of us at CFRI, have a joyous, joyous holiday season, a happy new year, and we will see you back here in February for the next CF Discovery Series. Thank you very much.